Hello, everyone. Tonight, we begin with a question about something you've likely seen from above, but never quite understood. Strange lines in a desert where no one lives anymore, where wind whispers across ancient sand and shapes too large to see from the ground stretch for miles across the plain. Have you ever wondered who made them and why? Join us to explore this dramatic and surprising story now. But instead of walking into the desert under the scorching Peruvian sun, you're sailing beneath stars. Stars you don't recognize. The ones above your home island sit in different places arranged with comforting familiarity. But now, you drift into unfamiliar constellations, their bright eyes watching from the sky like ancient sentinels. The breeze is soft, the sea quiet. The moon spills gentle silver over the waves. You shift your weight slightly in the canoe, feeling the smooth woven fibers beneath you. Beside you sits Lonnie, her braid tucked neatly under a wrap of cloth, her fingers wrapped calmly around the edge of the outrigger. Not far ahead, old Tua grips his carved staff, tapping it slowly against the wood in rhythm with the swells. He hums something too low to catch. You're not sure if it's a chant or just the mutterings of an old man who's lived too long with waves. Before you snuggle into your blanket, hit like on the video and comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's so fun to know who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You smell salt. Hear the gentle slap of water against the hull. You can even hear the soft creak of the sail's rigging as it shifts ever so slightly with the breeze. Somewhere behind you, young Koa clears his throat, his nervousness always just below the surface. It's Tua who speaks first. There's a place far across the sea, he murmurs, where the land is dry, like baked taro, and people once carved pictures into the earth. Not with tools, with walking. You tilt your head, unsure what he means. They made shapes so big, Lonnie adds, that you can only see them from the clouds. You squint toward the horizon. Are they teasing you again? Like the time Tua said, fish sleep with their eyes open, and you spent all night watching a net full of mackerel just to prove him wrong. But Tua's tone is too calm for jest. The lines he says softly are still there, even after the winds, the rains, even after the people vanished. You try to imagine it drawing something so large with nothing but footsteps. No ink, no rope, no poles or plumb lines, and no ladders high enough to check your work. It feels absurd, like trying to carve a canoe without ever looking at it. Some say the gods gave them wings, Lonnie whispers, so they could look down and trace their art in the sand. You almost laugh, but the hush in her voice stops you. The night deepens. Koa takes the paddle again, and you feel the familiar rhythm return, dip, pull, release. The sea is flatter now, almost mirror-like. The stars seem to drift across it following the canoe. You wonder if the Nazca, whoever they were, also followed stars across the land. Maybe not with sails, but with steps. Historians still argue whether those ancient desert artists had any way to see their own work, whether the lines were for the gods, the sky spirits, or for those who walk them in ritual. It's strange to think about a people drawing with absence. The Nazca Lines weren't etched by adding, but by taking away, removing dark sun-baked pebbles to reveal pale ground beneath. The patterns only became visible from far, far above. Like trying to whistle a tune only birds could hear. A soft splash beside you pulls you back. A flying fish breaks the surface arcs through the air, then disappears with barely a ripple. Lonnie doesn't react. She's seen it before. But you blink, still imagining a giant hummingbird drawn across the sand. Not flying, no perched forever wings spread in a silent prayer. Imagine holding a paddle. How heavy does it feel after an hour? Lonnie suddenly asks, almost like a riddle. Now imagine walking for days in the heat just to leave a mark no one else can see. You blink again, the paddle feels heavier in your hand now. The Nazca lived in one of the driest regions on Earth. Some parts of their desert haven't seen rain in centuries, yet they survived and thrived building aqueducts called puquios to bring water to their fields. Not with iron, not with gears, just stone and patience. You feel something stir in you, a strange admiration for a people who walked art into the earth. Maybe that's why you're here with Lonnie and Tua and Koa. To understand not just the Nazca's lines, but the feeling behind them. Tua chuckles softly behind you, as if reading your thoughts. Stories are like paddling. You keep going long enough, and you get somewhere. Even if you don't know where it is yet, you glance up again at the stars, trying to anchor yourself by the ones you do know. But the sky is strange tonight. The constellations seem to shift the more you stare. It's the perfect night to begin a mystery. Koa's paddle clacks against the edge of the canoe. A small sound, but enough to draw a sideways glance from Lonnie and a raised eyebrow from Tua. You glance back to see him grumbling, rubbing the side of his forehead with 2 fingers. Koa flushes pink, even in the moonlight, his grip tightening. It's the 3rd time tonight he's struck the hull instead of the sea. Steady hands, Lonnie murmurs, without turning her head. The ocean doesn't like to be slapped. You almost chuckle, but Koa looks too mortified for laughter. He exhales and tries again, and this time the paddle slices clean and true. The rhythm resumes. The silence that follows feels gentler. You can hear the distant cry of a seabird and the soft flap of the sail, shifting direction, slightly catching a deeper breath of wind. Tua taps his staff twice, then leans forward. Your mistake reminds me of another, he begins. One made long ago in a desert where there is no water to forgive you. You raise an eyebrow. Lonnie doesn't say a word she knows better than to interrupt when Tua winds into one of his stories. Koa looks visibly eager to redeem himself, sitting a bit straighter now. There were people there, Tua says slowly, who drew a line in the sand. Not a line like this, he gestures across the sea, but a line that ran for miles. A line that never wavered. It was straight as a pulled cord with no landmarks, no guides, no sails to catch the wind. He taps his staff again, and yet they walked it. With such precision, you'd think they had wings or eyes in the sky. Lonnie nods thoughtfully. The Nazca. The name hangs in the air like mist. You've heard it whispered over firelight in fishermen's yarns, traded with far-traveling strangers. A people of the dry lands. A people of the sky marks. A people who walked pictures that no one would see. Or maybe, not no one. Perhaps someone was watching from above. Historians still argue whether the Nazca created the lines for deities, for astronomy, or for something more practical. Irrigation maps, perhaps, or sacred walking paths. There's even a fringe theory that they were for ancient balloon voyages, but the truth lies half buried under centuries of wind and sand. Koa shifts uncomfortably, and you notice he's pressing one hand to his leg, maybe to ground himself. Or maybe it's just the strangeness of imagining a civilization that spent so much energy etching art into the earth, art that could never be fully seen from where they stood. They made monkeys, Tua murmurs. Huge ones. Spirals, a tail like a twister. Birds with wings as wide as this canoe is long. Spiders with impossibly perfect legs. Hands. Trees. But no names. No writing. Only lines. You tilt your head. But why? Tua shrugs. Why do we make chants? We whisper to no one. Why do we carve shells even when they'll wear smooth in the sea? Because the doing is the meaning. Lonnie smiles softly at that. She's carved her own share of paddles, each with little swirls and markings no one else notices. You've seen her fingers trace them during storms. I wonder if they had a koa, she says suddenly, casting the boy a sideways look. Someone who kept missing the mark at first, but learned to walk in rhythm. Koa bristles. I wouldn't step crooked if I had to draw a giant bird. Tua chuckles low and fond. Ah, but could you do it without ever seeing it? Imagine drawing a canoe from inside it. You picture that standing inside your canoe and trying to carve its shape into the ocean with your steps. Ridiculous. And yet the Nazca somehow managed to etch figures that spanned hundreds of feet across. From the ground, they'd look like nothing, just scattered gravel trails. But from above, they take shape, meaningful, alive. Koa frowns. They could have climbed a mountain to look. None tall enough, Lonnie says. Not there. Indeed, the Nazca Plains are nearly flat. No nearby cliffs, no towers. And the lines themselves are best viewed from hundreds of feet in the air. Long before humans ever took flight. You find your mind drifting now. Imagine you're a Nazca artist. Your feet scrape away the dark stones. You follow a rope, perhaps. You walk for hours. The sun bakes your neck. You reach the curve of a hummingbird's beak, not because you can see it, but because someone older drew it on a gourd and told you how far to step. You do not ask why. You only walk. Imagine doing that, Lonnie says gently, almost reading your mind. Walking a line with no end in sight. Not knowing what it will be. Only trusting the shape will form behind you. A hush falls. The sea is especially still now. You can hear Koa's breath, slow, steady, focused. Even he is wrapped in the image. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the Nazca weren't trying to create something for themselves at all. Maybe it was about the process. The belief that the gods above would see their steps and understand. Tua clears his throat. One time I met a trader who flew over that land. He said it looked like the earth had been tattooed, like the skin of the world had been marked with ancient ink. Lonnie leans back, resting her hand on the outrigger. A riddle no storm has erased. That image settles into your chest like a stone dropped into deep water. The sea rolls gently beneath you, and the stars wheel overhead. You look up and wonder, who are we leaving our lines for? Maybe the Nazca ask the same. The wind turns just slightly, and the sail breathes. Not a gust, just the faintest exhale from some distant place, as if the sea itself were shifting in its sleep. Your canoe tilts softly to the left, and Lonnie makes a subtle adjustment, tugging the cord with a flick of her wrist. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her movements say enough. The horizon ahead is pale with the promise of dawn. You can't see the sun yet, but the darkness is beginning to dilute, just a hint of gray pressed into the edges of the sky. It's the kind of light that makes the world feel unreal. As if you're drifting not on water, but between dreams. A sandbar appears in the distance, low and narrow. No trees, no huts, no smoke. Just a pale streak drawn across the sea, like a finger dragged through wet paint. Tua nods toward it with a grunt. Rest there, he mutters. The canoe glides in slowly. You feel the water grow shallow, its resistance softening as the hull begins to kiss the bottom. You hop into the knee-high tide and pull the canoe gently until it settles on the soft, gritty floor. The sand is cool beneath your feet, smoothed by years of tides. Koa stretches with a groan and immediately starts scanning the shoreline for shells. He picks up a crooked bit of coral and frowns at it, as if expecting it to say something wise. Lonnie crouches fingers, tracing the sand. After a moment, she draws something just a few lines. A long curve, a spiral, a dot. She smooths it over and starts again. They say, she says quietly, that some islands form shapes only seen from above, that there's a reef near Raiatea shaped like a manta ray, but only when the tide pulls low. You look out across the sandbar. It's just a bar, straight featureless. But when you squint, you notice something. The way the shells seem to cluster in a crescent, the shape of a wave left behind in the dampness. They aren't images exactly, but they're not random either. The Nazca Lines, she continues, remind me of this. Lines that only make sense when the world is viewed from higher than human feet can reach. Tua sits down heavily in the sand, propping his staff against his shoulder. People used to think the lines were roads, but they lead nowhere. Others said they were for water, but they follow no rivers. He scoops a handful of sand and lets it pour between his fingers. But what if they're like this, he asks. A message only seen when the sea pulls away, or when you stop squinting for answers. You sit beside him, noticing the quiet around you, the kind that makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. Historians still argue whether the Nazca Lines were ceremonial pathways or a kind of astronomical map, or simply expressions of culture, an earthbound canvas for spiritual thought. There are even stranger theories that they were created with the aid of simple hot air balloons' primitive flight and used to view the designs from above. There's no proof, only suggestion. Threads, not ropes. Koa crouches near a dune, watching the tide pool. Maybe they didn't need to see them, he says suddenly. Maybe they already knew what they looked like here. He taps his chest. They didn't need eyes to see. Lonnie gives a soft smile. That's what many say, that the lines were walked as prayers. You don't need to see a prayer. You feel it, step by step. She drags her finger in the sand again, tracing a slow spiral that curls into itself. You watch her. She's not looking at the shape. Her eyes are closed. Try it, she says. You hesitate, then kneel. Your finger meets the cool surface. You don't plan a design. You don't think. You just let your hand move. A loop, a curve, a return, a straight line bisecting the middle. When you're done, it looks like a feather, or maybe a wave, or maybe nothing, but it feels right. Tua is quiet. That's how you know he's impressed. When he talks too much, it means he's nervous. I heard once, he says, of a man who flew over Nazca and cried. Not because it was beautiful, but because it made no sense. And yet someone long ago thought it mattered enough to carve a monkey into the world. You smile at the image. A desert monkey, curled tail. 8 fingers on one hand, they say. Not 7, not 9, 8. No one knows why. Imagine seeing that, you say aloud. Flying over it, Tua shrugs. And yet the monkey never saw you. The tide creeps back in. The sand begins to darken as it drinks the sea again. Lonnie's spiral washes away in pieces. Koa's coral has disappeared into the foam. Your strange feather waves vanish grain by grain, but the feeling remains. Maybe that's the point. You return to the canoe in silence. The morning light is clearer now, and the air is warming. The kind of warmth that rests on your shoulders, not like heat from fire, but like a blanket pulled fresh from the sun. Lonnie adjusts the sail without speaking. Tua stretches his legs and mutters about breakfast. Koa is still looking at the tide as if hoping the lines will reappear. They won't. But the memory of them clings to the mind like a song you can't stop humming. Imagine walking a line you whisper just to feel its shape under your feet. The canoe lifts gently from the sand and begins to drift once more. The wind turns just slightly, and the sail breathes, not a gust, just the faintest exhale from some distant place, as if the sea itself were shifting in its sleep. Your canoe tilts softly to the left, and Lonnie makes a subtle adjustment, tugging the cord with a flick of her wrist. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her movements say enough. The horizon ahead is pale with the promise of dawn. You can't see the sun yet, but the darkness is beginning to dilute, just a hint of gray pressed into the edges of the sky. It's the kind of light that makes the world feel unreal, as if you're drifting not on water, but between dreams. A sandbar appears in the distance, low and narrow. No trees, no huts, no smoke. Just a pale streak drawn across the sea like a finger dragged through wet paint. Tua nods toward it with a grunt. "Rest there," he mutters. The canoe glides in slowly. You feel the water grow shallow, its resistance softening as the hull begins to kiss the bottom. You hop into the knee-high tide and pull the canoe gently until it settles on the soft, gritty floor. The sand is cool beneath your feet, smoothed by years of tides. Koa stretches with a groan and immediately starts scanning the shoreline for shells. He picks up a crooked bit of coral and frowns at it, as if expecting it to say something wise. Lonnie crouches fingers, tracing the sand. After a moment, she draws something just a few lines. A long curve, a spiral, a dot. She smooths it over and starts again. They say, she says quietly, that some islands form shapes only seen from above, that there's a reef near Raiatea shaped like a manta ray, but only when the tide pulls low. You look out across the sandbar. It's just a bar, straight featureless. But when you squint, you notice something. The way the shells seem to cluster in a crescent. The shape of a wave left behind in the dampness. They aren't images exactly, but they're not random either. The Nazca Lines, she continues, remind me of this. Lines that only make sense when the world is viewed from higher than human feet can reach. Tua sits down heavily in the sand, propping his staff against his shoulder. People used to think the lines were roads, but they lead nowhere. Others said they were for water, but they follow no rivers. He scoops a handful of sand and lets it pour between his fingers. But what if they're like this, he asks. A message only seen when the sea pulls away, or when you stop squinting for answers. You sit beside him, noticing the quiet around you, the kind that makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. Historians still argue whether the Nazca Lines were ceremonial pathways or a kind of astronomical map, or simply expressions of culture, an earth-bound canvas for spiritual thought. There are even stranger theories that they were created with the aid of simple hot air balloons, primitive flight, and used to view the designs from above. There's no proof, only suggestion. Threads, not ropes. Koa crouches near a dune, watching the tide pool. Maybe they didn't need to see them, he says suddenly. Maybe they already knew what they looked like here. He taps his chest. They didn't need eyes to see. Lonnie gives a soft smile. That's what many say, that the lines were walked as prayers. You don't need to see a prayer. You feel it, step by step. She drags her finger in the sand again, tracing a slow spiral that curls into itself. You watch her. She's not looking at the shape. Her eyes are closed. Try it, she says. You hesitate, then kneel. Your finger meets the cool surface. You don't plan a design. You don't think. You just let your hand move. A loop, a curve, a return, a straight line bisecting the middle. When you're done, it looks like a feather, or maybe a wave, or maybe nothing. But it feels right. Tua is quiet. That's how you know he's impressed. When he talks too much, it means he's nervous. I heard once, he says of a man who flew over Nazca and cried, not because it was beautiful, but because it made no sense. And yet, someone long ago thought it mattered enough to carve a monkey into the world. You smile at the image. A desert monkey. Curled tail. 8 fingers on one hand, they say. Not 7, not 9. 8. No one knows why. Imagine seeing that, you say aloud. Flying over it. Tua shrugs. And yet the monkey never saw you. The tide creeps back in. The sand begins to darken as it drinks the sea again. Lonnie's spiral washes away in pieces. Koa's coral has disappeared into the foam. Your strange feather waves vanish grain by grain. But the feeling remains. Maybe that's the point. You return to the canoe in silence. The morning light is clearer now, and the air is warming. The kind of warmth that rests on your shoulders, not like heat from fire, but like a blanket pulled fresh from the sun. Lonnie adjusts the sail without speaking. Tua stretches his legs and mutters about breakfast. Koa is still looking at the tide as if hoping the lines will reappear. They won't, but the memory of them clings to the mind like a song you can't stop humming. Imagine walking a line, you whisper, just to feel its shape under your feet. The canoe lifts gently from the sand and begins to drift once more. The sun is up now, though it hides behind a veil of clouds stretched thin across the sky. Not thick enough to block the light, but just enough to soften it. The sea reflects it like brushed metal, shimmering but muted. You watch the gentle ripples stretch in all directions endlessly. Lonnie ties her braid tighter. Her corded necklace swings slightly, with the wind, a shell charm clicking against the bone clasp. She leans forward and adjusts the small curved bone at the front of the canoe, a tool you've seen before but never fully understood. Watch this, she says to Koa, who has been chewing on a bit of dried taro and pretending not to be seasick. This isn't just a bone. It's a compass of a kind. You raise an eyebrow. That thing, it's shaped almost like a crescent moon, polished to a pale gleam with small carvings notched along its edge. She listens with it to a grunts, not looking up. Better than you listen with your ears. Lonnie smirks. When we sail by stars, we steer by light. But by day, by current, by birds, we feel our way. She tilts the bone slightly, letting the breeze pass over it. Then she closes her eyes, shoulders relaxed. This tells me we're brushing a northern eddy, she says. See how it pulls just a little. You frown. You mean you can tell that with a piece of whalebone? She shrugs. It's not the bone. It's the bone, the wind, and me. Tua clears his throat. The Nazca didn't have whalebone, but they had the wind and the birds. He pauses. There's an old story. He begins about a people who didn't sail, but who watched the sky the way we watch the sea. You lean in. The Nazca made their lines not just for the gods, he says, but perhaps to mirror the paths of the birds above them. The great ones, the condors, the eagles, the hummingbirds too. All drawn in the dust, Lonnie adds softly. They believed birds were messengers, that flying meant freedom, connection. So they walked their images into the ground, hoping the birds would carry the message upward. Historians still argue whether the Nazca geoglyphs, those enormous animal shapes and geometric patterns, were used for astronomical alignment, rain-making rituals, or a kind of earthbound offering. Some shapes match constellations. Others appear aligned with solstice points. And yet, others make no cosmic sense at all. That's the puzzle. You ever try to copy a bird's path? Tua chuckles. They don't fly straight. Lonnie laughs. But the Nazca did. Their lines run straight for miles, not wobbly, not wandering, as if they had invisible wings to guide their feet. Koa tilts his head. So, maybe they watched birds, then walked the paths. Or Lonnie says maybe they imagined they were the birds. That thought sinks in deep. You close your eyes and feel the sway of the canoe, the roll of the current beneath, the hush of the wind. You picture yourself, not here, but gliding in the sky above a desert. Below you, lines crisscross the tan floor like an ancient net, some wide, some narrow. And then the outline of a heron appears, or maybe a pelican. Its beak stretches longer than the riverbed. You feel a quiet awe. They say some of the Nazca Lines were made with simple tools, Tua says, interrupting your thoughts. Stakes, ropes, careful pacing. But how, Lonnie asks, did they keep the proportions right? How did they draw a perfect spiral while walking? Koa looks skeptical. They must have had something else. A trick. There's always a trick, Tua says. Sometimes it's just believing you can do something without seeing the end. That makes you think of Lonnie's curved bone again. She doesn't watch it. She listens through it. Maybe the Nazca listen through their feet. You reach into the canoe and pull out a coconut bowl filled with water. It sloshes gently. Lonnie takes it from you and holds it steady. Watch, she says. She points to the sky, to a bright dot in the cloud-thinned light. See that star, she asks. You nod, barely visible, pale as a smudge. She lowers the bowl and lets the water still. Then points again. The star's reflection hovers in the surface, more visible now than in the sky itself. Some say she whispers the Nazca used bowls like this, not just for drinking, but to see the heavens, reflected, reversed. Your skin tingles. The idea is simple, profound. A still surface showing the heavens quiet as a whisper. Imagine planting a 1,000-foot-long bird by watching the stars dance in a bowl. That's not technology, that's faith born of patience. Imagine holding a coconut bowl in the wind, Lonnie says, passing it to you. Could you keep the sky inside it? You try. It sloshes. Koa leans over too far and nearly topples the whole thing. Lonnie pulls it back, laughing. The Nazca must have had steadier hands, she says. Tua yawns loudly. Or maybe they didn't care if the lines were perfect. Maybe perfection wasn't the point. You set the bowl down carefully. The water settles once more, reflecting nothing now but the soft gray of the sky. You understand a little better. The Nazca weren't making art for others. Maybe not even for themselves. They were making it to mirror what mattered. The birds, the wind, the hidden shape of things. You close your eyes again. The canoe rocks gently. You breathe with it. Above, somewhere in the thickening light, a seabird cries. And below, the sand remembers every footstep. The sea turns quiet, so quiet that you can hear the creak of the canoe's fibers settling and the faint rustle of Lonnie adjusting her wrap. The light now is clean full. The clouds have scattered and the sky yawns open in every direction, crisp and blue. You find yourself blinking more slowly, lulled by the steady rhythm of waves and warmth. Lonnie squints upward, her hand shading her eyes. We're close to the island now, she murmurs. The one they call the flightless path. Koa perks up. Why flightless? Tua chuckles. Because it sits high, like it wants to be a bird. But no bird lands there. You scan the horizon. It doesn't look like much yet. Just a low smear against the sky, like charcoal dragged across parchment. But the closer you get, the stranger it seems. Its slopes rise with eerie smoothness, worn by wind but not broken. No trees, no rivers, just wind-whittled rock. Lonnie lowers the sail, letting the canoe drift in the shallows. You jump into the surf and help pull it ashore, the sand underfoot crunching like crushed bone. This island, if you can call it that, feels still. like something is listening. Tua leans on his staff and begins walking, no announcement, no ceremony. You and Koa follow. Lonnie lingers, eyeing the sky. As you climb, you notice the lines. Not Nazca lines, not the ones etched into Peru's dusty plains. These are smaller, shallower, made by erosion maybe, but they cross the rocky face of the hill in ways that feel intentional. They don't point anywhere, they don't follow the slope, but they seem to know what they're doing. Lonnie finally joins you halfway up her feet, bare against the stone. She brushes her fingers across the markings and frowns. You ever walk a trail that didn't lead you forward? She asks. You pause. Like a circle. Not quite. More like a loop with no center. Like it was meant to be walked, not arrived at. That strikes something in you. Historians still argue whether the Nazca Lines were meant to be seen at all, or if they were simply meant to be experienced. Some believe the lines were ritual pathways. You didn't look at them. You walked them. Maybe in single file. Maybe barefoot. Maybe carrying something to the gods. Can you imagine walking a path for 3 hours? Tua asks. And ending up where you started? Koa grins. I do that whenever I get lost. Lonnie smirks. Not lost, just circling meaning. You reach the top of the hill. It isn't much of a peak, just a broad, flat stretch of stone overlooking the water. From here, you can see the sandbars to the east and a reef that glows pale beneath the shallows. Tua points toward the empty sky. Now, pretend he says that you are a spirit who lives up there. What would you want to see from below? Koa tilts his head. Not people. No, Lonnie says, but maybe what they meant. Tua crouches slowly and begins to draw with a piece of charcoal from his satchel. Not on the stone itself, but on a palm leaf. Long strokes, then curves. He hands it to you. It's a bird, a strange one, not quite any you've seen. The wings are enormous, the beak long and fine. The feathers seem to echo outward like ripples. Not for the eyes, Tua murmurs, for the sky. You hand it back and look around the bare stone. Did the Nazca climb places like this? Lonnie nods. There are mountaintops in Nazca territory, with leveled surfaces like they flattened them on purpose. Some think they were observatories, or altars, Koa suggests. Tua shrugs. Or seats for gods. Maybe the gods sat and looked down to see the lines. You imagine that now, a divine figure, legs crossed on a mountain like this, watching mortals below, walking invisible paths, spirals, trapezoids, great animals rising out of dust like living symbols. One fringe theory, still unproven, but haunting, claims that the Nazca may have released simple hot air balloons to glimpse their own work. Just cloth, fire, and courage. But it's never been confirmed. Only dreamt. You close your eyes and picture it. A balloon rising over the pampa, drifting over a spider hundreds of feet long, its legs precise and symmetrical. A monkey with a swirling tail that spins like a chant you can't stop humming. A human figure, arms raised, known as the astronaut, though no one knows what it truly means. Imagine walking for days, Lonnie says, and never seeing what you made. Koa frowns. I couldn't do that, Tua says. But maybe you already have. You pause. Every paddle stroke, he continues. Every chant. Every shell strung onto a necklace. You leave a line. You just don't always get to see it from above. That quiets you. It's true. We don't see the shape of our lives while we're living them. Only afterward, from a distance. Maybe not even then. Lonnie picks up a pebble and sets it on a crack in the stone, then steps back and sighs. Even this, she says. Someone will find it one day and wonder, was it a sign, a pattern, a path, or maybe just a girl playing with rocks? Koa mutters. Lonnie throws another pebble at him. It bounces off his shin. He yelps. The mood lightens. But not entirely. The silence here holds something. Not sadness, not even mystery. Just wait. Like the stone remembers the people who stood on it and is waiting for the next to understand. As you descend the slope, the wind picks up. Not strong, but persistent. It hums across your ears and makes the rigging on the canoe whisper. Back on board, you take one last glance at the hill. You wonder how many other flightless paths are out there, not islands, not deserts, just meanings etched where no one looks. The sea is calm again, but your thoughts are full. It begins with a hush. No warning, no shift in the sky, no dramatic change in the waves. Just a hush, as if the air suddenly forgets how to move. Lonnie feels it first. She tenses her fingers, stilling on the sail's cord. Then the birds fall silent. Those tiny dots that had been circling above, now gone vanished beyond the edge of vision. Tua looks up, frowns. Koa's still chewing a piece of dried coconut, oblivious. Then comes the groan of the mast. Low, long, like a tired creature stirring from sleep. You feel the hairs rise on your arms. Storm. Not yet seen, but sensed. The kind that moves without fuss. The kind that creeps in while you're busy watching the sea for signs and forget to listen to the sky. The horizon darkens at the edges, cloud banks massing like stone temples pushed by invisible hands. Not lightning, not yet, but heavy, thick. Lonnie speaks in a tone you've only heard once before, when a reef nearly caught the canoe in its teeth. Drop the sail. You don't ask why. Koa scrambles to obey. You steady the outrigger, watching the fabric slacken like a sigh. The wind grows cold, not fierce, just colder than it should be. Tua mutters a chant under his breath, tapping his staff gently on the hull 3 times. One for the mast, one for the water, one for the wind, and then it hits, not with violence, but with purpose. A wave larger than the rest rises and rocks the canoe sharply. Water sloshes over the side. The sky lets out a low growl, like distant stone cracking. Rain follows not in droplets, but in curtains. Within seconds, everything is soaked. The canoe groans, the sail flaps wildly, despite being tied. Your hair plasters to your skin. Lonnie leans low, steering with hands firm on the paddle, her eyes narrowed into the mist. You squint forward, barely able to make out shapes anymore. Only the rise and fall of the water, the shimmer of rain hitting wave, and the shadow of Tua, holding his staff upright like a mast of his own. Koa, to his credit, does not panic. He grips the outrigger and begins to chant softly words you don't understand. Something old, older than this voyage, perhaps learned from his grandmother. And through it all, the wind whistles. It whistles like it has something to say. Something old, something drawn into the earth 1,000 years ago. Tua raises his voice above the storm, not shouting, but resonant. Do you know he calls that the Nazca made a serpent once? You blink away water. What? A serpent, he repeats. Its body longer than a fishing net, curving through the sand. Not straight, not pretty. A thing of power. Lonnie cuts in, still paddling. Some say it was for the rains. A prayer drawn into the dust. A call to the sky. You huddle lower water, pouring from your chin. And did it work? Koa shouts over the roar. Tua laughs, coughing. Maybe too well. Historians still argue whether some of the Nazca Lines, especially those shaped like serpents or spirals, were attempts to summon rain or to guide the water when it came. Some believe they were sacred paths walked during droughts, a way to show devotion when crops withered. You wonder now, in this storm, if the Nazca would have walked those lines barefoot, in the mud, their offerings drenched their feet raw. Would they have believed it was working? Would you? A bolt of lightning flashes brief white sharp, and for a moment you think you see a shape in the clouds. Not a bird, not a serpent. Something harder to name. A curve, a loop, a hook of wind. Then it's gone. The rain begins to thin. The wind-spent curls away, and slowly the sea eases. Your breath feels loud again. The canoe rocks more gently now. Water still pools at your feet, but the waves no longer climb your ribs. Lonnie wipes her face with her sleeve, pushing a few strands of hair behind her ear. Her necklace is soaked, the shell charm clinging to her collarbone. Tua exhales through his nose. Storms come like questions, he says, and go without answers. Koa leans back and groans dramatically. I hate surprises like that. Lonnie grins. That's because you haven't learned how to listen before they speak. You settle into your seat again, wringing out your tunic. The clouds are still overhead, but lighter, now streaked with hints of gold from the sun above. You breathe deeply, tasting the salt and the rain. That serpent, you say, turning to Tua. Why did they choose it? He shrugs. The serpent brings change. She writhes through earth and water. She sheds her skin. She frightens and heals. Lonnie adds, the Nazca may have believed the serpent guided the rains, or punished them. Or maybe Tua says, tapping his staff against the hull once more, they just saw her in the clouds. The way you did. You say nothing, but you saw something, and it looked back. The storm may be gone, but it leaves behind more than water. It leaves memory. Lines across your thoughts, etched without tools. You look out over the sea again, and though it's still the same water, the same canoe, the same crew, something feels different. You crossed a serpent's path. Now the journey is truly underway. Koa is unusually quiet. He sits cross-legged near the front of the canoe, face tilted toward the sky, but eyes unfocused, like he's watching something that isn't there. The sea is calm again, deceptively calm, like a sleeping animal that dreams with one eye open. The storm is gone, but its presence lingers in the air, thick and whispering. You notice Koa clutching something in his hand, a small piece of driftwood, smoothed by the waves. He's carving it with the edge of a broken shell, slow, careful strokes. Not his usual frantic fidgeting. Lonnie leans forward. You dreaming again, Koa? He doesn't answer right away, just presses his thumb to the wood, then looks up at you both. I saw them, he says softly. During the storm. You raise an eyebrow. Saw who? Koa's brow furrows. The lines, in the clouds, just for a moment. There was a monkey and a bird, wings stretched out across the sky. Lonnie meets your eyes, half smiling. The Nazca monkey, Koa nods. With that weird tail, all curled like a shell. You glance toward the horizon, where a pale mist still clings to the sea. The idea of Koa dreaming Nazca glyphs into the sky doesn't surprise you. After all, wasn't it in the middle of a storm that those ancient people called on the rain? Tua stirs in his sleep at the back of the canoe. Or maybe he's not sleeping. It's hard to tell with Tua. They say Lonnie begins that the Nazca monkey is one of the oldest. His tail curves 7 times perfect spirals, but no one knows why. Some say the spiral means life, Koa murmurs. Others say it means confusion, or both, Tua mutters from his corner. Historians still argue about the monkey glyph, about all the animal figures, really. Were they symbolic? Did they represent constellations? Were they part of a language we've lost? The hummingbird, the spider, the whale, the dog, they stretch across the desert floor like memories too large to forget, but too faint to explain. You sit back and close your eyes, letting the boat rock you. Imagine this, you are one of them, the Nazca. You carry your water jug down a narrow dirt path. The sun is high. Your feet burn. You pass a line, not a crack in the earth, but one made deliberately. You follow it not because you know where it goes, but because it feels important. Eventually, it curves. You walk along the loop. You are one of dozens, maybe hundreds, moving in silence. Your footprints leave no mark, only the path remains. You don't know that you are forming an image. A monkey, they'll say later. A symbol of something you don't name. You return home. You sleep. The next day, you walk again. Koa's voice pulls you back. What if they weren't trying to draw anything, he says? What if they were just following feelings? You look at him. Like dreams you can walk through, he adds. Lonnie nods slowly. Or dances you perform without music. Only the rhythm of the wind. The thought is calming in a strange way, that maybe the Nazca weren't trying to send messages to gods or trace constellations. Maybe they were just making art the way your people sail, because it's in their bones. Koa holds up the piece of driftwood he's been carving. It's rough, but it clearly shows a spiral. Crude, but deliberate. For the monkey, he says. You smile. Tua sits up with a groan, stretches, and taps his staff once. There was a time, he says, when people thought the hummingbird glyph was a real bird fossilized in the dirt. Then they flew above it and saw the beak. He chuckles. Imagine thinking you were standing on bones only to find you were walking on a painting. Lonnie adds, the hummingbird's one of the most delicate, wings wide, tail sharp. Some say it aligns with the sunrise on the solstice, but others say it doesn't, you note. Tua shrugs. Depends on how you tilt your head. That's the thing about the Nazca. The more you study them, the more they resist. They remain etched in the earth, but not in explanation. Their glyphs don't give up meaning like seeds from a pod. They withhold, they suggest. Even their animals are strange. The dog with its tongue hanging out, the spider with one leg longer than the others, the hand's glyph with only 9 fingers. Some researchers think they were stylized on purpose. Others think they're symbolic. Still others whisper about gods, or sky people fringe ideas. Yes, but the Nazca invite such wonder. Koa interrupts your thoughts again. The hummingbird, he says. Maybe it wasn't about flying. You glance at him. Maybe it was about hovering. That hangs in the air for a while. Because you've seen hummingbirds do that still motionless, yet moving so fast you can't see it. They float in place, hearts beating faster than thought. Maybe the Nazca wanted to freeze something like that. A stillness that vibrates. You stare out over the water again. The sea now is the color of old jade, flecked with lines of foam that stretch like brushstrokes. You imagine the monkey curled tail spiraling, dancing in the sky during the storm. You imagine the hummingbird wings spread hovering over the earth. You imagine feet dusty and calloused, tracing lines without knowing what they become. You imagine Koa carving spirals into driftwood, unaware he's repeating an echo 1,000 years old. Imagine Lonnie says gently what it would feel like to walk a shape that only exists in memory. You close your eyes and feel the rhythm of the waves beneath you. And for a moment, you swear your heartbeat follows the curve of a spiral. The light begins to shift again. Not sunset, no, not yet. But that quiet afternoon drift, where shadows stretch a little longer and the warmth seeps deeper into your bones. The sea feels lazy, curling around the canoe in slow, rhythmic waves. Your fingers dangle over the side, brushing the water's surface, cool and soft like polished stone. You sit with Koa and Lonnie in the center of the boat. Tua hums something tuneless, tracing a pattern into the wood near his feet. Not words, not music, just the kind of humming that keeps the body from becoming too still. Koa is watching the sky, his face relaxed now. He's not carving anymore, just breathing. Then Lonnie speaks quiet and slow. You know what puzzles me the most? You raise your eyebrow, inviting her to continue. They never saw them, she says. Not really. The Nazca made lines they couldn't see. You nod. They must have had something. A map, Koa offers. A rope, Lonnie muses. A way to measure steps. But still, how do you walk a shape into the earth? without ever seeing it. Tua clears his throat and speaks without looking up. You don't draw a bird by being a bird. You draw it by knowing what a bird is. But how do you get the beak right? Koa asks. Faith Tua replies. You all go quiet again. Historians still argue whether the Nazca used some kind of survey technique, simple tools, string grids, wooden stakes to map out their designs on a smaller scale before enlarging them. Some glyphs are geometrically flawless. Others, like the hands with 9 fingers or the spiraling monkey tail, are oddly abstract, almost playful. Some say the Nazca built these lines purely through planning. Others believe they may have used more instinctive, even spiritual methods, moving as if guided not by sight, but by a deeper sense of pattern. You reach for a reed mat tucked in the canoe's supply bundle. Lonnie helps you unroll it. Inside, wrapped in cloth, is something Tua calls the shell map. It's not really a map, not in the way you're used to, but Tua treats it like treasure. He leans forward now, drawing the cloth back. Dozens of small shells are tied together with hair-thin twine. Not in a circle, not in a line. More like a web. Some shells are larger than others, some painted faintly with clay symbols. Every few inches, a knot. This, Tua says, is how we remember places we can't see. He gestures to a row of shells tied in a broad curve. Here, he says, is the atoll shaped like a fishhook. He points to another cluster, and this, he adds, marks the reef that glows green at night. You blink. But how do you read it? He shrugs. You don't. You feel it. Koa pokes one of the knots. You can't feel a monkey in this. Tua chuckles. But maybe the Nazca had something like it, a mental map, one they passed from hand to hand, one you couldn't read, only trace. You study the shells the way they clack together softly when the canoe rocks. A map made of sound-weight memory. Maybe the Nazca had no shell maps, but something like them, a web of meaning strung between generations. Koa leans back again. Still seems impossible. So does sailing without a compass, Lonnie says, nudging him. Yet here we are. The canoe rocks gently beneath you, the wood warm under your palms. You try to picture it again. You are Nazca. You carry a staff. You walk a straight path across dust. You count your steps. The sun presses against your neck. Somewhere far behind you, another person walks a curved path timed to yours. Neither of you knows the whole shape, but both of you trust that the shape exists. You walk for days. You finish, and then the wind smooths your footprints away, but the line remains. Imagine that, walking something into the earth with such belief that you never need to see it to know it's real. Tua speaks again, his voice quieter now. There's a line near Nazca they call the Ray Center. You look over. He traces a shape in the air. It's not a glyph, not an animal, just a place where dozens of lines intersect, like the center of a star. Why, Lonnie asks. Tua shrugs. Maybe it was a gathering point, maybe a place where they listened to the wind, or maybe you think it was where something once touched down. Some fringe researchers, dismissed by most but persistent, believe that the Ray Center was a kind of runway, that the Nazca Lines were signals to something above. Not gods, not spirits, but watchers, theories without proof. Yes, but the desert keeps secrets like cupped hands. Koa shivers. I don't like that idea. Good, Lonnie says. Then it probably isn't true. She smiles, but you know she's just as curious. You stretch your legs, letting your toes dip into the sea. The water is warmer now. Above, the clouds have scattered into long, sweeping trails, lines of their own stretching across the blue in streaks of white. They look almost drawn. You think Koa says suddenly that one day someone will find our canoe and not know what it was for. Lonnie chuckles. Probably. They'll say it was a temple, Tua adds, or an offering to the fish gods. You all laugh. But it lingers, because maybe the Nazca didn't think they were making mysteries. Maybe they thought it was obvious. and we're just the ones too far removed to understand. You look back down at the shell map, its knots shining in the sun, each one a line, each line a memory, and the meaning just beyond your reach. Nightfall returns slowly, not the sudden drop of darkness you sometimes see on stormy seas, but a careful dimming, as if the world is gently being reminded to hush. The clouds turn violet, first, then fade into streaks of plum and amber, until even those colors are swallowed by the quiet gray of dusk. Stars begin to blink awake timidly at first, then with growing boldness. You find yourself watching Lonnie as she sings to the sail, not loudly, just a whisper of melody. It's not a chant for the gods, not a navigational song, but something from her childhood. Old words that mean little now, but soothe like the soft brushing of wind over cloth. Koa has curled against the outrigger, his eyes heavy-lidded, his carved spiral tucked beneath one arm, like a dream he doesn't want to lose. Tua remains upright, his staff resting across his lap, his fingers tracing invisible lines on the wood, as if still drawing something no one else can see. The water is calm again, flatter than before, and eerily still. Too still. You lean forward. Why's the sea gone quiet? Tua lifts his gaze, as if trying to listen to something even further below the silence. We're entering a dead patch, he says. No current, no wind. Just waiting. Waiting for what Koa mumbles without opening his eyes. For the land beneath us to remember what it once was. That sentence sits heavy. You look around. The sea stretches in every direction, flat as a piece of woven bark. Even the stars, reflected on its surface, look reluctant to ripple. Lonnie says quietly, they say the Nazca walked their lines during the dry season, when the desert wind was so still that even birds stopped flying. You imagine it. A group of people wrapped in linen, their faces hardened by sun and dust, walking across a plain that does not move. Their feet shuffle their breaths, puff little clouds of dust, and behind them, dark pebbles pile up on the edge of a line that will not be seen from the earth. No wind, no sky song, just silence. The spider glyph, Tua says, was made in one such season. Koa stirs. The one with the long leg? Tua nods. One of its legs is extended unnaturally far. It points toward a constellation Orion, or maybe toward water. Some think it was a symbol of fertility. Others, something more strange. Historians still argue about the spider. It's one of the most curious Nazca figures, precise, symmetrical, yet asymmetrical in a single detail. The exaggerated leg. Some say it matches a rare species of spider, only visible under magnification, suggesting the Nazca had knowledge lost to us. Others call it coincidence. Some believe the lines buzz. Tua says, his voice now low, almost conspiratorial. When walked correctly, they hum beneath your feet. You raise an eyebrow. Buzz? Resonance? Lonnie says, eyes twinkling. Like the sound you hear in your bones when you swim too deep. Koa chuckles, half asleep. Or when you eat too many fermented yams. Tua ignores him. The spider, he says, was never just a spider. It was a weaver, a messenger, a symbol of connection, and maybe, just maybe, it was a key. To what you ask, he only shrugs, but you sense he knows more than he says. The sea below the canoe shifts again just a little. A subtle change in color, a darkening, a patch of water that seems less reflective than the rest. Look, Lonnie whispers. You all peer over the edge. Below you, faint shapes begin to appear, long ridges in the seabed, gently illuminated by moonlight. They don't move. They don't swirl like coral. They're too straight, too deliberate. Koa gasps. Are those lines? You nod slowly, unable to speak. Beneath the canoe, just visible through the wavering sea, are etchings in the sand, subtle but unmistakable. They stretch like threads, straight and narrow, some crisscrossing, some running parallel. Tua doesn't even look surprised. Some say the lines don't stop on land, he says. They continue beneath the sea. Paths the Nazca drew before the waters rose. But they lived inland, you say. He shrugs. Or maybe the sea lived inland once. Fringe scholars have speculated cautiously that some ancient geoglyph cultures may have etched symbols near once coastal regions now swallowed by time and tectonics. But no solid proof exists. Just traces, hints, rumors. And yet, here you are, floating above one. You think they could walk, these, Koa asks. Lonnie smiles. Maybe they swam them. A soft current curls beneath the hull. Not strong, but present, like something gently waking. You sit still, breath shallow. Even the stars seem quieter. For a moment, you imagine the spider beneath the water. Not dead, not erased, just dreaming. Its long leg pointing toward the heavens, or perhaps down to something even deeper. You close your eyes and listen. You can almost hear the hum, a frequency too low for the ears, but not for the heart. Imagine, Lonnie says, swimming through a memory so old it forgot it was ever above water. The canoe shifts again, carried now by a new current. You let it, because maybe the spider has spun her web once more, and you are gliding along its thread. The moon is high now, bright, clear, and round as a polished shell. Its light drapes across the water in long silver ribbons, laying a path ahead of the canoe that shimmers with every rise and fall of the waves. You've seen many moonlit nights before, but this one feels unusually clean. Like even the stars are stepping aside to let the moon speak. Lonnie has tied her hair back again. Her shell necklace swings as she leans forward, narrowing her eyes at the dark shape in the distance. Not a boat, not an island, a ridge. She says it before you can ask. We've arrived. Tua taps his staff twice and grunts. The island of dry roots. Koa sits up quickly, rubbing his eyes. Why dry? Because nothing grows there anymore, Lonnie says. Only stone and dust. You glance ahead. The ridge is close, now low, craggy, with fingers of rock that stretch into the sea like the skeleton of some long-forgotten creature. No lights, no movement. Just silence. You beach the canoe in the soft hush of moonlight and step ashore. The ground beneath your feet is cracked brittle, like old bark left too long in the sun. The air smells like salt and clay, and something older, something hollow. Tua walks ahead without pause, his steps sure as if his feet have already walked these lines in some forgotten dream. You're standing, he says softly, on land that remembers thirst. And now, you see it grooves in the earth. Some shallow, others worn deep. Not animal trails, not cracks from heat, but lines, parallel, geometric, too precise to be accidental. The Nazca built Pukios, Lonnie explains, kneeling to trace one line with her fingers. Spiral aqueducts dug deep into the earth to draw water where none lived. Historians know this well. The Nazca survived one of the driest climates on Earth, where rainfall was so rare it could vanish for years at a time. And yet they thrived, thanks to elaborate underground channels and spiral vents that let them harvest water from beneath the surface. Koa whistles. They watered a desert. Lonnie nods. They carved spirals into the land, and it gave them life. The spiral again, like the monkey's tail, like Koa's carving, like the way your own thoughts loop when you're too tired to untangle them. You kneel beside one of the grooves. At first glance, it's nothing, just a dip in the ground. But when you follow it with your hand, you notice its path bends gently to the left, then hooks inward. Not random. It chooses its way, and further ahead, a round depression, ringed with stones descending into the earth, like the mouth of a buried flute. Pukio Tua murmurs, still here. You approach the spiral, peering inside. It's dry now, no water in sight, but the stones are smooth, too smooth to have formed by accident. You can almost imagine the sound of trickling water echoing through the shaft like a heartbeat. Lonnie crouches beside you. Some believe these weren't just aqueducts. They were sacred too. The spirals weren't just for drawing water. They were symbols of eternity. Tua adds in offerings. Offerings. He nods. Pebbles. Shells. Food. Whispers. Whispers. Koa grins. You're saying they dropped words into a well? Why not? Lonnie replies. The earth listens. You pause, hand hovering over the mouth of the spiral. Could it be true? Could someone have stood here 1,000 years ago, murmuring thanks into the stone as water rose below? Historians still debate the full purpose of the puquios. Were they purely practical early feats of civil engineering? Or did they carry symbolic meaning shaped into spirals, not just for airflow, but to mirror the cosmos? Some believe the Nazca saw water as more than survival. It was a spirit, a gift of God. You drop a small pebble into the opening. It vanishes without a sound. No splash, no echo, but somehow it feels heard. The wind brushes your cheek gently, as if in response. Imagine, Lonnie says, softly digging these by hand, with stone tools. No iron, no pulleys, just patience. Koa stares down into the spiral, awe blooming across his face. They must have believed they could speak to the earth. Tua smiles, and maybe they did. You sit back on your heels, gazing around the island. Now that your eyes have adjusted, you notice more. Other spirals. Faint, half-buried lines etched across the dusty ground. Some wide, some narrow, some leading nowhere, or maybe everywhere. They didn't need writing, Lonnie says. They wrote with dust. And their sentences, spirals, lines, absences. You look up at the stars. No constellations you recognize, just rivers of light swirling overhead. What if the Nazca were copying that? Not the shapes of birds or beasts, but the paths stars carve across the heavens. You whisper aloud. What if they drew the sky into the ground? Tua chuckles, and gave the gods a map to find them. The wind picks up, just slightly rustling through the cracks and crevices of the dry land, singing a quiet song you don't understand. You sit in silence for a long time. The puquio before you, the stars above, and the desert beneath your feet, still whispering the story of people who etch their needs, their thanks, and their wonder directly into the bones of the earth. You wake before the sun, not fully, not with clarity, just that gentle stirring, when your breath changes and your ears begin to listen before your eyes agree to open. The air is still, almost unnaturally so. No bird song, no wave slap, only the soft creaking of the canoe's ropes and the barely audible snore of Tua beneath his travel blanket of woven pandanus. Lonnie is already awake. You can tell by the way her silhouette moves slow and precise, standing at the shoreline like a shadow carved from starlight. Her hands are clasped behind her back. She's not watching the sea. She's watching the desert, the island you landed on last night, dry, cracked, veined with forgotten water paths, still feels more like a dream than a place. You rise without a word and step onto the cool sand. The first light of dawn brushes the horizon, a dull smudge of color behind the distant ridges. Koa is curled up, his arms slung over his spiral carving, as if afraid someone might take it away. He breathes softly, a child mid-story. Come, Lonnie whispers. I want to show you something. You follow. She leads you across the flat stones, the ones that crunch softly beneath your steps like ancient parchment. The spiral from last night still waits behind you, but she walks past it, past the puquios, past the straight grooves etched into the land, and then she stops. Before you, in the morning's blue light, is a massive figure in the dust. At first, your eyes don't understand it. Just shallow lines, scratches, but then wings, outstretched, a body, a tail, a bird, or rather, the outline of one. Not just any bird either. This one is sharp, precise. Its wings spread wider than the canoe. Its beak points east. It is made entirely of absence lines drawn not with pigment, but by removing the top layer of stone to reveal the pale earth beneath. Lonnie kneels and runs her hand gently across the edge of the line. This one wasn't made for walking, she says. The ground is too soft. The line's too shallow. It's meant to be seen. But from where you ask, from above, she replies, the silence that follows isn't empty. It's full of echoes of footsteps that never came close to this place, of voices that whispered measurements under their breath, of eyes that stared up and dreamed downward. Some say, she continues, that these lines were made for the gods, for the spirits of the air. Messages drawn into the bones of the earth so they could be read from the heavens. You stare out across the figure. There's no point standing on it, you wouldn't see anything. But from high above, you imagine it would be striking. A perfect bird, etched into the dirt, unmoving, unaging. The Nazca made dozens like this, Lonnie says. Some even more complex. Some simple. You nod slowly. You've heard the stories. Figures spread over the Nazca plains. The hummingbird, the dog, the orca, the heron, the tree, the hands. The man with wide eyes they call the astronaut. Each one carved into the desert with no apparent order, no shared direction, no written record. And yet they persist, thousands of years old, unfaded by time, still visible from the sky. Historians still argue, Lonnie says, whether they were for astronomy, for ritual, for art, or for something else entirely. You crouch beside her. The dirt beneath your fingers is surprisingly soft, lighter than expected, fragile. If the wind changed, these lines would vanish, you say. She nods. And yet they haven't. Why not? Because the desert itself is still. It preserves what it's given. It waits. You brush a line clear again with your palm. And yet, they couldn't see them. Not the way we can. They didn't have wings. Maybe they didn't need them. You look up at the sky. The pale thread of morning continues to rise. The stars slowly fading behind it. How did they make them so perfect, you ask? With ropes and stakes, some say, she answers. They plotted with simple geometry, triangles, circles, measured steps. Some say, you add, they used balloons. Lonnie chuckles. Tua says that too. You smile. It's a fringe theory, yes, but one that refuses to fade, that the Nazca may have created simple hot air balloons, animal skin, reeds fire, and used them to hover above their desert art. No proof, no remains. But the scale of the glyphs, it makes you wonder. You both sit in silence for a while, watching the light rise. The bird at your feet looks ready to fly. Koa arrives eventually, rubbing his eyes and mumbling about dreams. Tua trails behind his staff, marking the ground with each step. He doesn't say anything at first. He just looks at the figure, then nods. Ah, he says finally, the sky spirit. Koa frowns. Is that what this is? In some stories, Tua replies, this bird was not just a messenger, but a guardian. A watcher who flew above the land carrying prayers between the people and the stars. He taps the line with his staff. And now, it just lies here, waiting. Waiting for what? You don't ask, because maybe the answer is too big or too simple. Maybe the bird isn't waiting for gods or aliens or archaeologists. Maybe it waits for understanding, for stillness, for someone to walk beside it, not to solve it, but to feel it. You take a long breath. Imagine, Lonnie says, believing so deeply in a shape that you never need to see it. You do imagine it, and for a fleeting moment, in the hush of dawn, the bird seems to lift, not off the ground, but in your mind. And you realize maybe it's been flying all along. You leave the bird behind, not because you want to, but because the journey must go on. The wind has returned gentle but steady, and the canoe calls. As you and Koa push it back into the water, you glance over your shoulder once more at the shape on the land. From this angle, it's nearly invisible again. Just a few shallow marks in a colorless field. And yet now that you've seen it, it feels as if it's watching you. Tua notices your lingering gaze. Nothing ever leaves you once it finds your attention, he says. That bird will be flying in your mind for the rest of your life. You believe him. The canoe glides back into open water. The desert island shrinks behind you, its dry spirals and vanished aqueducts folding back into the landscape like an unfinished story. But the feeling, the sense of presence of something deeper at work remains in your chest like the last echo of a chant. Koa sits at the bow legs crossed, running his fingers over the spiral carving again. His expression has changed over the days. Less frantic, more reflective. He still fidgets, still speaks too quickly when excited. But now there's weight behind his words like stone beneath sand. Lonnie adjusts the sail. We follow the coast now, east, then north. Where to, Koa asks. Toward the mountains of mirrors, she replies. He squints. That's not a real name, Tua chuckles. Real enough for those who live by stories. You settle into your seat, letting the rhythm of the waves carry you. As the morning deepens into day, the shoreline appears a narrow strip of rising land, etched with jagged ridges and sharp plateaus. The coast is bare treeless, its stones gleaming like glass in the sunlight. The Nazca made lines here too, Lonnie explains, but they're harder to see. You nod. On the open plains, the glyphs stand out against the pale earth, but here in the hills, the lines twist and blend with the terrain. They're not just drawings now, they're alignments. You mean with the stars? Koa asks. Lonnie smiles. With the sun? The canoe comes to rest against a rocky inlet. You step ashore and begin to climb not high, but steep. The stones beneath your feet are warm and hard-worn smooth by centuries of wind. The higher you go, the more the land begins to flatten, like the spine of some giant creature stretched out under the sun. And then you see it, a ridge, straight as a thrown spear cutting through the stone at an angle. Not natural, not accidental. This one, Lonnie says, points to the solstice. You stare down its length. At the far end, a dip in the horizon, just enough to let the sun pass through like an arrow loosed from the earth. Historians still puzzle over certain Nazca lines that appear to align with astronomical events. Solstice sunrise, equinox sunset, moonrise at specific intervals. Not all lines match these phenomena, but enough do to suggest purpose, Koa whispers. So they made calendars you could walk on. Tua laughs. Calendars, altars, mirrors. Who's to say the sun wasn't a guest they wanted to greet properly? You crouch and place your hand along the groove. It's cool, despite the heat. Narrow, sharply cut. Why not just build a tower? Koa asks. Because a line, Lonnie says, doesn't cast a shadow. It invites one. You pause. That's the thing, isn't it? Towers declare. Lines invite. You follow the groove with your fingers, tracing its length as the sun creeps higher overhead. You imagine the ancient builders standing here watching the light pass along this stone, like a spirit returning home. They say, Lonnie adds, that when the sun reaches the center of this line, it touches the earth's heart. You glance up at her. You mean symbolically. She shakes her head. I mean, it glows. The whole path lights up for a breath. Then it's gone. You sit back on your heels, looking across the flat stone, and you wonder how long it took to carve, how many seasons passed, how many arguments about where exactly the sun would rise, how much faith it took to trust that on the right day, at the right moment, the light would find its way. Imagine you say aloud, measuring time by where the light lands. Lonnie smiles. We still do, but we forget. Tua walks to the end of the groove, his steps slow but steady. When I was young, he says I thought the Nazca were crazy. All that walking, all that carving, for what? He touches the end of the line, and now you ask. He looks up. The sun gleams in his eyes. I think they just knew what we forget, that nothing is forever. So, you mark what you can, and you hope the sky notices. The silence that follows feels reverent, not like a moment of awe, but like a pause at the end of a song you didn't know was ending. You stay on that ridge for a long time, watching the sun rise, waiting for the groove to glow. And when it does, just for a moment, it's like a bell ringing silently across time. A golden thread drawn not on paper, but between stars. You don't say anything. You don't need to, because in that light, you understand the Nazca didn't just carve lines. They carved moments. You leave the ridge in silence. No one speaks as you descend. Not because there's nothing to say, but because saying it, that would only flatten what's still ringing inside you. The line you just walked, the groove that caught the sun, the way it lit up like a thread pulled taut across centuries. It doesn't need words. The canoe rocks gently in the inlet, as if waiting patiently for you to return. You step aboard, and the others follow. Koa still hasn't said a word. He just runs his thumb slowly along the edge of his driftwood spiral, over and over, as if it's a question he hasn't yet asked aloud. The wind has changed direction. Lonnie notes it with a glance, then adjusts the sail. We follow the coast a little longer, she says. There's one more place. You settle into the familiar rhythm again. Paddle. Rest. Breathe. Listen. Hours pass. The coastline shifts. Cliffs now not plains. Stone carved by wind and time high above the water. And there, hidden in the folds of the cliffs, a path. Narrow, jagged, rising at an angle like the stairway of a forgotten ziggurat. You land at a small cove, barely big enough to hold the canoe. Lonnie leads. Tua follows, without complaint, even as the incline grows steeper. This path was not made by water, Lonnie says, or by wind. It was carved by the Nazca. Koa asks, climbing behind her. No, she says, but perhaps by people who learned from them. You frown. I thought the Nazca vanished. Tua chuckles. People don't vanish. Only names do. And he's right. Historians still puzzle over the Nazca's decline. Drought, soil, exhaustion, war. The culture dissolved around the 8th century, but many believe their traditions bled into surrounding peoples. Lines gave way to terraces, aqueducts became wells, and perhaps somewhere the habit of walking meaning into the land never truly died. You reach the top. It's not what you expected. No grand view, no massive glyph, just a wide, flat terrace of pale stone, and on it lines, dozens of them, faint, worn, but unmistakably human. These are walking lines, Lonnie says. You step forward. The surface is almost polished from centuries of sun and air. The lines crisscross, some wide enough for two to walk side by side, others narrow as a single footstep. None of them seem to lead anywhere, but all of them feel intentional. You trace one with your foot. It curves, gently loops, once then disappears under a patch of moss near the edge. Were these for ceremony, you ask? Lonnie shrugs. Some think so. Others say they're meditative paths. Tua crouches, running his hand along a set of lines shaped like a triangle within a circle. These weren't meant to be seen from above. These were meant to be felt. You crouch too, and now that you're looking closer, you see them. Small symbols etched at junctions, spirals, suns, teeth, eyes. These look newer, Koa says, pointing to one. They are, Lonnie replies. People still come here. They add their own. Quietly. Not to destroy, but to continue. You sit down, crossing your legs, in the center of 3 intersecting lines. A strange peace settles into your chest. Not the peace of stillness, the peace of belonging. Like sitting at the end of a long journey and realizing the trail has only widened, not ended. Imagine, Lonnie says gently, what it feels like to walk a question. You close your eyes, and you try. You rise slowly and begin to walk. Not in a straight line, not toward any goal, just following. One foot in front of the other, the stone warm beneath your feet. The lines guiding your steps, not to a destination, but into rhythm. Koa joins you. Then Lonnie, even Tua. The 4 of you move, weaving silently through lines drawn by forgotten hands. You feel your breath align with your pace, your heartbeat fall into cadence. Something in your shoulders softens, not because of what the lines mean, but because you no longer need to ask. Historians call this place many names. A site of ritual, a forgotten terrace, a mystery, but to you, it feels like memory made stone. Koa stops, eventually pointing to a curve. I want to add one. Lonnie nods. Then add it. He kneels, finds a small piece of obsidian by the edge and begins to scratch. Slowly, carefully. He doesn't draw a bird, or a spiral, or a spider, just a curved line, like the edge of a wave, or the spine of the wind. You sit beside him. Tua murmurs. The earth accepts all footprints, even the uncertain ones, and you know this line too will remain for a while, until the wind erases it, or someone finds it again, and wonders what it meant. You don't leave right away. The terrace holds you longer than expected. Long after Koa has finished his quiet carving, long after Tua has rested his legs, long after the sun has passed its highest point and begun its slow descent, behind the cliffs you remain. No one speaks of departure, not because the sea isn't calling again, but because this place feels suspended, like a page in the middle of a book you keep rereading, not for answers, but for rhythm. Eventually, it's Lonnie who rises, brushing dust from her palms. Time to return, she says softly. We've followed the lines long enough. Koa sighs but doesn't argue. The descent is easier. The wind is behind you now, not in your face. The cliffs seem gentler in the afternoon glow, as if they've softened their edges after seeing you walk among their lines. The canoe rocks slightly as you approach, but the tide has returned just enough to ease it into motion. You step aboard, one by one, and push off. The coast begins to fade. Once again, the sea stretches ahead like a blank canvas, soft and wide, dotted only by the dark silhouettes of distant fish breaking the surface. You lean back against the curve of the hull and let your fingers trail in the cool water. Koa lies with his arms behind his head, staring upward. He doesn't fidget this time. He just breathes. Tua is humming. Not a chant, not a tune. Just humming. A sound like driftwood knocking together in the shallows. And Lonnie, she's watching the sky. You follow her gaze. There's a stretch of clouds above, long and wispy, curling in parallel strokes. You realize with a strange tightness in your chest that they look like lines. Nazca lines, drawn by the wind. The sky is always drawing, Lonnie murmurs. We just forget to look long enough. You nod. Do you think the Nazca looked up more than they looked down? You ask. She considers that. Maybe, she says. But I think they looked through. That settles over you like warm cloth. The Nazca weren't making maps, perhaps. They were making mirrors, not to see themselves, but to see beyond themselves, into the earth, into the sky, into whatever threads connect everything stone. Water, wind, light. Historians still don't know why so many of the glyphs were animals. Some say they symbolized spiritual guardians. Others believe they marked pilgrimage paths, teaching people how to walk with intention. A few fringe thinkers even suggest the glyphs are part of a forgotten language, a script of motion and shape meant to be read, not with eyes, but with footsteps. Imagine Tua says suddenly, a sentence you don't read, but walk. Koa sits up. Like a chant you trace, you smile. Or a prayer with no words. The sun is lower now, painting the sea in streaks of orange and gold. The clouds burn softly above their shapes, still whispering. Lonnie pulls something from her bag, a folded cloth. She unwraps it carefully, revealing a flat piece of gourd, smoothed and painted. It's old. You can tell from the feel of it. The way time has worn the edges. The way the paint has faded into the surface instead of flaking away. From my grandmother, she says. She said it was a model, a Nazca design. You lean in. It's simple, a series of lines crossing in an X shape with a curve looping around one end. It's not a bird, not a monkey, just a shape. Is it a glyph? Koa asks. No, Lonnie replies. It's a memory. Tua smiles at that. Same thing. Lonnie runs her fingers across the gourd gently. She said every family kept one. Not all the same, not all recorded. Just something to remind them of how their feet should move. You watch the pattern again. It doesn't speak to you, not directly, but something about it feels familiar, like the way water curls around a paddle, or how sea foam spreads across sand before pulling back. You close your eyes, and suddenly you feel the lines again. Not the ones on land, but the ones beneath you. The paths the canoe has traced across the ocean, invisible but present. Drawn not by intention, but by travel. You wonder, what if the Nazca weren't trying to be seen by the gods above? What if they were simply trying to remember themselves, to draw their presence into a land that otherwise forgets so easily? Koa asks it out loud. What if the lines were just a way to say we were here? No one replies, because maybe that's it. Maybe all the walking, the carving, the spiraling, the careful planning under dry skies and empty stars, it was all just a way of leaving a fingerprint on the world. Not for power, not for praise, just for presence. You reach into the water and let it curl around your hand. The canoe drifts on. The sky dims. And still somewhere in the desert, the lines wait, unmoving, unfading, undecoded, but not unread. Because now, you carry them, not in your hands, but in your rhythm. The final night comes quietly. You don't know. It's the last, not until much later. But even so, something about the air feels different. Not in the wind, which is soft and constant, nor in the sea which remains gentle beneath your hull, but in the silence between things. It's a silence with depth. You and Koa lie side by side in the canoe, the sky above a spill of stars more vivid than you remember. The Milky Way is a silver river overhead, wider than any water you've ever crossed, flowing endlessly into black. Tua sits at the stern, head bowed, as if listening to a voice inside the waves. His staff rests across his knees. Even Lonnie, always attentive, always focused, leans back now, one arm draped lazily over the sail rope. She hums, not to guide, just to soothe. You glance at Koa. You still thinking about the lines. He doesn't answer right away, just folds his hands behind his head and breathes. Finally, they feel bigger now, not just marks, but like rooms I walked through. You nod slowly, and now they're walking through you. Tua chuckles. Told you. Once you follow a line, it never truly ends. The sky is full of motionless stars. Yet you know they move. Slowly. So slowly. Their dance is patient. Measured. Just like the Nazca. Just like this journey. Do you remember? Lonnie says that night, we saw the lines beneath the sea. Koa grins. I thought it was a trick. It wasn't, Tua says. Just another echo. The sea holds many things. It holds the outlines of forgotten reefs, the long bones of sunken ships, the last breath of voices that have fallen silent. And maybe, just maybe, it also holds lines. Nazca lines, or something like them, that no longer live on land, but still whisper beneath the tide. You close your eyes and try to imagine what those people thought as they carved. Not their tools, not their rituals, but their feelings. What it felt like to wake before dawn and walk a mile just to reach the first stake in the ground. To smooth a trail with your feet. To remove dark stones by hand one by one, revealing pale dust below. To do it without seeing the final shape. Without knowing whether it would be remembered, or forgotten, or misread. Maybe they didn't care. Maybe they just walked. Tua stirs tapping his staff lightly. Once he says, my uncle told me that to draw something enormous, you don't need to be big. You need to be still. Koa squints at him. What does that mean? It means the earth does the moving. You just have to stay steady. Lonnie nods. The lines only make sense when everything else moves around them. You think of all the things that have moved on this journey. Clouds, tides, stars, your own doubts. But the Nazca lines, they stay. They've stayed for thousands of years, untouched by rain, unmoved by storm. Not because they are protected, but because they are settled. They belong to the land in a way most things never do. And now, in the stillness of this final night, you feel them settle into you, not like a secret, but like a rhythm. You feel it in your breath, in the slow creak of the sail, in the warmth of Koa's arm beside you, in the hum of Lonnie's voice fading now to silence. You look up once more. The stars are mirrors tonight. You see shapes in them, not constellations, but glyphs. The hummingbird, the spider, the monkey's tail. Not literal, just felt, traced in your mind, not in the sky. As if the lines have risen into the heavens to rest. Tua speaks one last time before sleep. There are some things we'll never know. He's not sad when he says it. He's almost smiling. Some lines we aren't meant to follow all the way to the end. Just far enough to learn how to walk with purpose. You nod. Not because you understand everything, but because you no longer need to. The sea sighs beneath you. The canoe drifts. The sky watches. And somewhere far inland in a desert that no longer breathes the way it once did, the lines remain. Waiting. Not for discovery, but for recognition. Because they were never lost, only unread. And now, in the silence of the final night, you realize you don't need to solve the riddle. You've lived it, step by step. You awaken to a soft rocking. Not the sharp tug of waves or the creak of shifting sail, but the slow sway of a boat at peace with its path. The sky above is pale blue, almost white at the edges. No clouds. The stars are gone now, hiding behind the light. The shoreline ahead is unfamiliar. New trees, new hills, and somewhere maybe a village rising with the sun. You sit up slowly. Your body is sore in the gentle way only travel can cause, not from pain, but from living fully. Koa is already awake, legs dangling off the side of the canoe, feet skimming the surface. His spiral carving rests beside him, weathered and cracked at the edges but whole. He turns to you, eyes brighter than you remember. We made it, you smile. I think we were making it the whole time. Tua still sleeps at the back mouth slightly open, staff cradled across his chest like a child's toy. Lonnie stands near the sail facing the morning, her braid fluttering in the breeze. She doesn't speak, But the look in her eyes says it all. We've returned, but not the same. You glance down at your hands. They feel like yours, but also like someone else's. Someone who has traced spirals into sand, followed invisible lines over water, watched ancient birds take flight from dust. And in that quiet moment, you remember the stars. Koa learned to read the rainstorm that spoke in serpents, the monkey tail curled inside a dream. Lonnie's bowl of water holding the heavens like a mirror. Tua's story about the ray center where all paths converge. Your own feet, walking lines, not drawn on paper, but on memory. Every step, every chant, every carved shell. It all returns now, like a tide washing over the edge of your thoughts. You recall how Lonnie once said, "Imagine walking a question." And now, after all this time, you understand. You did. The Nazca Lines may never be fully explained. Were they offerings, calendars, messages? Stories for gods above, some say yes, others say no. The theories stretch wider than the plains themselves, woven through with astronomy, mythology, hydrology, and even whispers of visitors from beyond the sky. But you see them now, not as puzzles, but as testaments, not to mystery, but to presence. They are the echoes of hands that walked purpose into the earth, of people who looked up at stars and believed their footsteps mattered, who drew spirals not to explain the world, but to stand inside it. And in your own way, so did you. Lonnie turns from the bow and meets your gaze. "Before we dock," she says softly, "there's something I want to say." You nod. She kneels near you, pressing her palm gently to the canoe's side. "Thank you," she whispers. "To who?" "To the ones who came before, to the lines, to the wind, to you." You look at her, and for once words aren't necessary, because you feel it too. The canoe bumps lightly against a wooden dock. Birds call overhead. The wind smells of damp leaves and wood smoke. A new shore, a new day. But the rhythm of the Nazca still hums inside you. As you step on to land, you pause and glance back. And for a moment, just a flicker, you imagine the wake your canoe leaves behind is more than just ripples. It's a line, a new one, drawn not in sand, but in water. Not permanent, but meaningful. Thank you truly for joining me through every emotion, every turn, every moment of this journey. It's been an adventure, and I'm grateful to share it with you. As we close this tale, I wish you a peaceful evening. May you have a restful night, deep sleep, and dreams filled with wonder and light. Rest well, you've earned it, and when you're ready for the next story, I'll be here waiting to journey with you again. Before you go, if you loved this tale, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what moved you, surprised you, or lingers with you long after the story ends. Until we meet again, good night, and see you in the next adventure.